Welcome back, everyone, to the College Football 360 YouTube channel. Here we are live on a Friday night for the first time. This is my third ever live stream. It's going to be really fun, really laid back. We are going to be talking all about the Week 9 matchups, everything happening tomorrow, and we will be talking about other coaches who I think will or really need to be fired within the time span of now till, excuse me, from the time span of now till the off season as well. That's a continuation of what I had with my Wednesday live stream. So welcome in, everyone. I think it's going to be a great live stream, and we're going to be talking about these Week 9 matchups. I have a couple that are highlighted. We're going to go through all the top 25 ones and then hit on some of the Big 10 ones as well. I'm trying to keep this live stream to about between 45 minutes to an hour. So, without further ado, I think it is time that we get into some of these matchups here. Obviously, I'll spend more time on the higher profile ones over, the Wisconsin versus Oregon game. Of course, everyone knows about that game, but we will touch on it. So, without further ado, let's just get right into it here as we transition over and talk about these top 25 matchups here. And it really is safe to say that it's um, very this week is very interesting. So we'll go ahead and start off by talking about UCLA and Indiana. As you can see here, the spread is IU minus 26.5 points. The total is at 52.5. And let's just go ahead and look at this matchup here. ESPN has a very nice layout. It's the noon game on Fox. I think it's going to be a very interesting game for a couple of reasons. Really, it obviously it does say over here that Indiana is favored uh, by ESPN's FPI by 96.3%, but that's really not indicative of how it is. UCLA, after starting 0-4 or 0-3, has bounced back. They've won 3 Big 10 games. As really quick, we go over here and look at what they've done. They lost their first 4 games, and then they really brought it back together again. One against Penn State at Happy Valley, one at Michigan State, really crushed Michigan State at their place, and then beat Maryland at home, that game right there. So the Bruins are a completely different team. They fired their head coach after that Northwestern game. I'm pretty sure it was after the Northwestern game, and they're a completely different team. And so they're a winning team with this current staff and current roster. And Nico Iamaleava is he's a different animal. He's played really well in Big Ten play. And as you can see on your screen here, he's got 1,355 passing yards, 10 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. And he's just been a really good player, and he's leads the team in rushing as well with 360 yards. So the talent is there, and he's quietly been a really good quarterback for the Bruins as well. So uh, the talent around him is iffy, in my opinion. I don't think it's the greatest, but I do think that he helps to elevate each of his positional rooms. I think he makes the offensive line look a lot better than they are. I think he makes the receivers look a lot better than they are as well. So I think this UCLA team is going to be a very hard team to beat. Now, excuse me, that being said, you have Indiana, who's 7-0, has steamrolled pretty much every team they've played, with the exception of Iowa, which is an anomaly, and Oregon, because Oregon was the number 2 ranked team at the time, and of course they came out and won that game at Eugene. So I do think that Indiana is a top 2 team, top 3 team, in fact, and it's in large part to Fernando Mendoza. I mean, you look at his stat lines here, he has 1,755 passing yards. His touchdown to interception ratio is insane. It's 21 touchdowns to 2 interceptions. I really think that he should be in New York in the Heisman finalist category there, and he's a Heisman level quarterback right now. He's playing really well. Uh, uh, and then you have the rushing leader, Kalen Black. I forgot to say how to say his first name. Kalen Black, and he is a stud as well. 72 carries, 3 rushing touchdowns, and leads the team in rushing yards with 439 through these first 7 games. So really, he averages a good amount of yards, and they obviously got Elijah Surratt there leading the way with receiving yards. And Omar Cooper, the number 2 guy, is actually really good as well. I really like him as their number 2 guy. But Elijah Surratt is he's a top 3. Excuse me. He's a third round talent level in the draft upcoming this year, in my opinion, which means that he's a really good player. I really think that he's an elite wide receiver at this juncture, and I do think that the Indiana Hoosiers are going to have uh, a hard time beating UCLA. I say all the positives on both sides, and really, I do think this game is going to come down to how scrappy can UCLA play. Because if Indiana plays a clean ball game and UCLA plays a clean ball game, Indiana is going to cover the spread, and Indiana's going to play really well. But if UCLA can get scrappy, if they can get Indiana to be really undisciplined, I do think that this game could get really interesting. But for now, I do think that Indiana will cover the 26.5 points. I think Indiana's going to be really prepared in this game. They're going to come out firing, and I think they're going to win in a big fashion. So that is those are my thoughts on that game. You have the Syracuse Georgia Tech game. I'm not really going to touch on it that much. I really like Syracuse as a team, by the way. I think that um, that they were the victims of the transfer portal. Really, a lot of great players left their team in the portal, and I do think that they are overall a good team, but Syracuse again lost a lot of really good players in the portal last cycle. They were in a borderline elite team last. They were a borderline elite team last year. Now they're just a pretty good team this year, and obviously they've been really up and down, 3-4 overall, 1-3 in ACC play, and obviously Georgia Tech is one of the big talking points that no one talks about. As no one talks about Georgia Tech, not even uh, not national pundits, not even YouTubers that I see. But I do think that Georgia Tech is one of the main storylines this year. I called it. They were top 15 in my preseason poll, and now they are number 7 in the country. They're undefeated, one of the few undefeateds left. As we go ahead and look at them, by the way, I do think that they will win this game pretty darn easily. And, they went on the road, beat Colorado in Boulder. That was a very tough game to play. Beat Clemson at the time, who was number 12 at home. Then they have gone on a tear. They beat Duke at their house last week, which I think was a really good win. I think Duke is a really solid team. So I do think that they have their work cut out for them because they do have to play Pitt. They do have to play Georgia at the end of the year. But this is a nice break for them. They play Syracuse, at NC State, and at Boston College. I do think they'll win all 3 of those games. If they lose to one, it's going to be a slip up against NC State. But I do think that excuse me. I do think that Georgia Tech is a team who's really going to come out of the ACC. I think they'll be in the ACC title game. And we'll look at some of that stuff a little later. And then at the noon window, we have one of the most anticipated games of the week. It's Ole Miss at Oklahoma here. Ole Miss is ranked 8th, Oklahoma 13th, as y'all can see. And if we look at the matchup predictor there, the FPI on the other side, OU is slightly favored at home, but if this was a neutral site game, it would probably be 50-50 or something to that effect. And Oklahoma's favored by 5.5 points. I would take Ole Miss plus 5.5 points right there. I do think that they will keep it within a field goal, and I do think that that Ole Miss is going to come out on top. Ole Miss, I've really been impressed by them. Their defense has been rock solid, whereas their offense has been really good but has sputtered at times. Oklahoma has been really inconsistent, in my opinion. They've had a couple really fugly wins, in my opinion, where you kind of cringed watching them, like, ugh, are they really going to come out of this game? And they did. And I think it's good that they won so fugly, in my opinion. But I do think that that is a little bit of a cause for concern. They did not play well at all against Texas in the Red River Shootout recently. As we go and let's just go ahead and look at them. Uh, you know, at home versus Michigan, won that game, but again, that was a little bit of a fugly win. They were, you know, off and on at times in that game. The Texas game was really bad. South Carolina game was off and on. Auburn game was back and forth, and Auburn's not a very good team. South Carolina's not a very good team. Texas this year is not as good as they were last year. So I do think that Oklahoma has taken advantage of a pretty easier schedule to start the year. And I think that they'll end up losing to Ole Miss. I see this game being a 27-24 victory for Ole Miss. I forget Trinidad Chambliss, their quarterback. Incredible story for him, but his touchdown to interception ratio is really good at 8-1, does not turn the ball over. Kwan Lacey is a fantastic running back. He's a top 5 running back in the SEC right now, in my opinion. He's got 618 rushing yards with double-digit rushing touchdowns with 10 there as well. The receiver room is solid. Harrison Wallace leads the way with 400 for Ole Miss. And I think the defense, like I said before, really good defense for Ole Miss, and they have been really good so far. I just want to go ahead and look at what Ole Miss has accomplished this year. They beat LSU at home. They beat Arkansas, Tulane, who I think will come out of the G5 as the team in. It's either going to be them or USF, who we will talk about in a bit, who comes out of the G5 for that playoff spot there. And I mean, their schedule is not like terribly difficult. I mean, they've got over the large part of it. So Ole Miss really does, if they win this game, it's a very crucial game for them because if they win this game, you see over here these SEC standings, they will, you know, possibly get even further up. They'll probably stay at 4 or even go further up depending on if A&M loses to LSU, who we will be talking about later in the show as well. Excuse me. So I think it's imperative that they win this game. It's the hardest game left on their schedule without a doubt. They have a not very good South Carolina team up next. Obviously, the Citadel. We need to get rid of that game, but as it stands, it is happening. Florida, who is amidst a lot of turnover, they should be winning that game at home, and then at Mississippi State, one of the worst teams in the SEC. So I do think that if they beat Oklahoma, they'll probably win out. And Ole Miss, I think, is really set for a really good year this year if they end up beating Oklahoma. And even if they don't, even if they keep it close, even if it's the reverse, if it's 27-24 Oklahoma wins, I do think that that Ole Miss will still go 10-2. I think that I'm really high on Ole Miss. I've been high on them. I think I had them top 10 in my preseason poll. So I do think that they're pretty darn good. And just looking at the rest of Oklahoma's schedule, what happens if they win this game and if they lose? If they lose, the rest of the schedule looks really tough. It really does look really tough. They go on the road to Tennessee and Alabama, and then they finish at home with Missouri and LSU. Now, if you really want to stay competitive, you're talking about you're splitting that. You're talking about going 9-3. 9-3 with this schedule possibly gets you into the playoff, possibly. And well, depending on how Tennessee, Bama, Missouri, and LSU end as well, LSU could be, without a head coach by that time, but they also could be looking toward an SEC title of that game. So a lot of this stuff is a little bit unknown as well. So we do need to talk about um, the ifs and ands and the buts. But for this purpose, I do think if they lose to Ole Miss, it looks really bad. And if they win versus Ole Miss, I think it still looks pretty bad, their schedule going forward. But the good news is if they reach 9 wins, I think that they'll be in the playoff. I honestly do because of their schedule. The question is, will they? And I'm just not sure if they will. If I were to predict it right now, I would think that, like I said before, they're going to lose to Ole Miss. I think they will lose to Tennessee. I think they will beat Tennessee. I think they'll lose to Bama, and then I think they would. You see, it's tough. I think that they would beat Missouri, and I think they would lose to LSU. Um, Switch that. Sorry, lose to Missouri, beat LSU. There we go. So I do think that they'll end up with 4 losses this year. But a lot remains to be seen. Let me just pop out the chat. Looks like nothing's going on there, so let's go ahead and move on. So that was, you know, it's one of those games that's going to be really fun to watch, really entertaining game, really entertaining noon slate here. A lot of ranked teams play in this noon slate. Mm. All right. So, Virginia and North Carolina, we're not going to talk about this that much. Virginia minus 10.5. I would definitely take UVA on that one. I think that Virginia will be able to beat North Carolina pretty handily, and we'll talk about North Carolina's coaching situation as the night progresses. It's not very good, and I think they will end up firing Bill Belichick, or at least they should at least. Then you have USF against Memphis here. I just want to take a quick look at this game. A lot of people aren't going to really realize the significance of this game here. So this is for the American, really for the title. This is really the American title game, the American Athletic Conference, the AAC. As you can see here, the matchup predictor is 50-50 because both these teams are 6-1. USF is 6-1. Their only loss is to Miami. They beat Boise. They beat Florida. They lost to Miami, and they've just been great in conference play. They're 3-0 in conference. Memphis is 2-1 in conference. They are 6-1. They've beat an FBS team, or well, let's go ahead and check that because I'm not sure. Yes, they beat Arkansas. I knew that they beat. I thought that they beat Arkansas. They did. Their loss to UAB last week was definitely unfortunate, but I do think that this is a really it's an interesting game to follow. I'm not going to necessarily watch it, but I'm going to be tracking it. The 6.5 point spread is definitely interesting. I don't think I would bet it, but if I would, I would slightly take Memphis, I think, to cover this spread. I think it's going to be a really fun game to watch. I think it's going to be really close, and um, I think that US this is really for who's going to play in the G5 as well. I think it's down to these three teams. Memphis, well, really the winner of Memphis and USF, and then Tulane as well coming out of the Sun Belt. So, just an interesting game for you to look out there for. We have Bama and South Carolina also at the 3:30 slate. Bama's going to win this game. South Carolina, definitely an intimidating place to play, Williams-Brice Stadium, but South Carolina has not been very good this year. They're 1-4 in SEC play. As we take a look at what they've done so far this year, they beat Virginia Tech, who that's not a very good win now because obviously they fired Brent Pry, their head coach, and they're currently searching for one right now. So they've kind of punted on this season. They're playing right now. We might check in on that later. Beat some FCS school, lost to Vanderbilt at home. That really ignited everything because I think at the time they were South Carolina was top 12 at that time. So that was a really gut punch to them and really started the big slide for them. Lost at Missouri by 9 there. Wasn't particularly close by any means. Beat Kentucky, but Kentucky is this year's Purdue of last year. Purdue went 1-11 last year, beat some FCS school. It was so bad. Kentucky's in the same boat. Kentucky is insanely bad this year. They're not good at all. I honestly think that this year's Purdue would beat Kentucky on a neutral site. I honestly think that. Then they lost to LSU and Oklahoma, two pretty good teams in their own right, and they don't have an easy schedule ahead of them. They have Bama, Ole Miss, and Texas A&M, and I think they'll lose to all three by double digits. They have Coastal, and then that Clemson game is going to be interesting because Clemson isn't great either. So they could end up if they surprise and beat one of those three between Bama, Ole Miss, and Texas A&M, and then ended up beating Clemson, they could make a bowl game. But the odds of them not missing a bowl game this year are really high, and that's crazy considering they just went to the Citrus Bowl last year, a very a very prestigious bowl game in its own right. And then we have Bama here. Bama, after that loss to Florida State, which looks really bad now, by the way, because Florida State is terrible now. But we can excuse that if that's their only loss this year. They have South Carolina. They get LSU and Oklahoma at home in the following weeks. That's huge. The odds of them dropping one are pretty good. I do think that Bama is probably going to beat both of those teams. LSU is a bit on the decline. If they don't win this week, then, it really doesn't look good for them going forward. And you wonder when that team's spirit breaks. But we'll get to LSU later. And then obviously the Auburn game at the end of it. Stephen A is impressed with Ty Simpson. That's shocking. I was about to go on a Stephen A rant right there, but I won't. I'll save that for another day. Okay, so I do think that Bama will cover the 13.5. They'll win this game probably spitballing 31 to 14, something like that. It's 30 to 14, something in that range. So let's go. Who do we have next? Missouri and Vandy. This is a very interesting game in my opinion. Uh, Really, the hype around Vandy is kind of crazy. They're 6-1 now, 2-1 in the SEC, and Vandy is given the slight edge over Mizzou. Mizzou has been very quietly very good this year. Everyone is siding with Vanderbilt. Everyone and their mother's going with Vanderbilt right now because they're the hot name, and they're never good at football, and now they're good at football, so we all got to root for them and all that. But Missouri is uh, they've been very quietly good. Their only loss being to Bama, who's a top three team right now. Bo Pribula has been pretty good overall. Now in SEC play, he hasn't been the best. You can look at the 7 interceptions right there as a case, but he's a really good runner, and they're a run first team as well. As you can see, Ahmad Hardy, the transfer from ULM. Yes, I did get that. I had him as one of my top 5 running backs in the country in the preseason, and that has proven to be true. He's definitely still a top 5 running back in the country as he approaches 1,000 rushing yards already through 7 games. And honestly, he could hit that tomorrow, possibly, with 840 yards right now. I do think that he is one of the premier backs in this league. 139 carries. He's their bell cow. He's awesome. He has a really nice blend of power and speed, and I think that he will. If Missouri's going to win, he's going to have to carry it for over 130-ish yards, in my opinion, because that's where they're going to lean on. Bo Pribula did not look great as a passer versus Bama, although he was great on the read option and all that stuff, which makes them such a dynamic duo. Kevin Coleman Jr. Leads the way with receiving yards there with 449. The receiver room's just but that's because they lean on the running game so much. Vanderbilt, it's very interesting. They built their roster around 2 players, Diego Pavia and Eli Stowers. Eli Stowers is, I think, the best tight end in the country right now, and it isn't particularly close. Eli Stowers has 300 leads the team with 355 receiving yards, with 28 receptions and 2 touchdowns. He has been really good. Like I mean, I can't sing his praises enough. And he has a track record of this as well. As you see here in 2024, he had 638 receiving yards, which is a ton for a tight end. And he's on pace to do even better than that. And I think that he is really ready to go. And I think he is one of the top players on this team. He's Diego Pavia's favorite target. That is for darn sure. And the defense for Vanderbilt has been amazing as well. Vanderbilt has been one of those teams that has really been just fantastic, in my opinion, as we look here. Um, just want to look at the defense really quick. CJ Hurd at safety has been really good. Look at the sack numbers here. Miles Capers off the edge has been great as well. Interception leaders, they have a bunch of guys with interceptions. The defense has been really solid. It's like you don't have one guy who is just the flat out the best on that defense, but you have a ton of guys stepping up. You have a ton of guys who not many people have heard of that are stepping up, and names that I'm still getting used to as well. As you can see here on the receiving end, leads his team in receptions, yards. Junior Sherrill has the most touchdowns on this team, that red zone threat. But I mean, they built this team around Eli Stowers, and so far it's working out really well. They have a good rushing attack. Cedric Alexander is a really good running back as well. Diego Pavia is laying it all out there on the field. I think he kind of knows that he's not going to be an NFL star. Because he really isn't going to be an NFL star. He's going to be, he's a college hero type of guy. I bet he gets drafted, but I don't think he's a guy who's going to go and make waves in the NFL. He's a guy who's going to leave it all out there on the field for the Commodores in his 7th season. That's very hard to imagine, but yes, it is his 7th season. But I mean, looking ahead, they've had several impressive wins. At the time, number 11, South Carolina, 11, not 12. Yeah, going back to last point there. They pummeled South Carolina. They pummeled everyone that they've played pretty much. Again, lost to Bama. That was a revenge game. They did not look very good in that game at all. Beat LSU coming out of that. That was a great response. And then how do they play versus Missouri? That is the question. And then obviously Texas, who isn't. I could definitely see Vandy beating Texas. And then you got Auburn and Kentucky, which would both be wins. And then that Tennessee game, I'd say, is a coin flip because it is at Tennessee. So looking at this game here, the spread is 2.5 points. I wouldn't touch that. I would probably, if I would bet this game, probably sprinkle a little money line on Missouri. I do think that Missouri is going to come out of this game and really surprise a lot of people. A lot of people don't know a whole lot about Missouri. It goes back to my earlier comment. Everyone and their mother loves Vanderbilt right now because, they've never been good at football. Like you can see right here, all these videos are all about, Vanderbilt, how awesome Vanderbilt is right now. So I do think that Missouri is going to answer the challenge. I think they're going to wake a lot of people up. And I think that they are going to end up winning this game, in my opinion, but I do think that it could go either way. Okay, so that is it for that matchup. Very big matchup there. And then BYU and Iowa State is up next. BYU is one of the several remaining undefeated teams. Now they travel to Iowa State, who's a very good team as well. Bear Bachmeier has been elite for BYU. Rocco Becht, also on the other side, has been elite for Iowa State. LJ Martin for BYU, just a stud. Bell cow for them. They run it through him. 127 carries, 774 yards. Abu Sama on the other side has been pretty good as well. Last 5 games. Well, let's just go ahead and look at both these teams. And so I think so. Let's see here. That they got their big win. BYU did in the Holy War against Utah. Utah was ranked at the time, and they really haven't played anyone. They went to Colorado, which is very tricky. Beat them by 3 in that game. So this is another big test for them. Their schedule isn't really that easy. So they had Colorado. That's a pretty tough game. Utah, obviously ranked at the time. Iowa State is a fringe ranked team. They've been ranked in and out of this whole season, so they're a top 30 team. Texas Tech is a top 15 team. Cincinnati at that time is going to be a top 20 team, as we'll see with Cincinnati later. TCU is probably top 35 team, and UCF is the worst left on the schedule, and they're probably a top 40 team. They've had some pretty impressive wins as well. So BYU, they have a hard stretch, but if they can get to 10 or 11 wins, they have a really good case to make the playoff and really do some damage, in my opinion. Iowa State, on the other side, they've taken some bad losses to Cincinnati and Colorado, but they do have chances to bounce back here. If they can beat BYU, if they can beat our ranked Arizona State, and just finish out the rest of their schedule with wins versus teams that aren't very good, like Kansas, Oklahoma State, TCU is probably fringe right in there. They can really make up a lot of ground in trying to get to the Big 12 championship game. I don't think they could be an at-large bid for the playoff, but I do think since we are at that time where we're looking toward the playoff, I do think that they would need to win out to get to that point. But in this game, I think Iowa State is favored. I would definitely put money on the 2.5 points on BYU. I do think BYU is going to end up winning this game. I think that they're a lot more solid team. Kalani Sitake is a top 15 head coach in my opinion. Just the way he gets his guys to play from every single week, it's really impressive, and I really do like that. Now, here's one of the games I really wanted to highlight is Illinois, top 25 ranked Illinois, going to Washington to play the Huskies. The Huskies, according to FPI, are favored to win this game, and they are favored in the spread total as well. They are favored by 3.5 points. I'm going with Illinois all day. Illinois has really proven themselves, in my opinion, other than that Ohio State game, that they really, excuse me, that they are a legitimate team, in my opinion, and they have proved me wrong on that. And I think that they really are going to do well. Washington, on the other hand, is on the downward trend. If we're looking at trends, Illinois is on the up and up, and Washington is on the down right now, and that's just the way it is. Washington, if we go and look at them, they beat Rutgers. Rutgers is a terrible team. They've squeaked out a win at Maryland. They lost to Ohio State. They lost to Michigan really bad last week. And in that loss to Michigan, they lost their starting Well, I think it might have been the game before, but they lost one of their starting tackles, and that has been a really weak point right now. Their offensive line has not looked very good, and they have been bullied up front. And that is where Illinois is going to beat you, is up front, in my opinion. Their offensive line is really good. They give Luke Altmaier all the time in the world. You can see right there, 13 touchdowns to 1 interceptions. What does that tell you? He has the time in the pocket to make the easy reads, to make the easy throws, and find guys when they're open downfield because he has that time. He has that luxury to, throw the ball downfield because he can just stand in the pocket all day. Obviously, a generalization, but I do think that Altmaier is a hell of a quarterback, and I think that his offensive line really helps him out. Illinois features several really good backs, including Caden Fagan, who leads their team in rushing yards, but you also got Khalil Valentine, Aiden Laherty, and both those guys. I really looked at Khalil Valentine. I think that he's revved up. I think he's ready to go, and I think that he is a guy who um, we'll wait till this loads here. I think he's a guy who can really make an impact on this game. And if we look at the rest of Illinois' schedule, they have the worst of the Big Ten left. They played at Indiana versus USC and then Ohio State and came out with one win. I said if they would come out with one win, they would be pretty much legit in that 3-game stretch. Indiana, yes, that was a terrible loss. You flushed that. Ohio State, they, got a couple garbage time touchdowns to make it not look so bad, but that's a game that you throw away. But you look at the USC game, the way they battled, the way they fought back, that was a back and forth game against a team that is right there, right next to them in like a tier list type of thing. But you look at how they battled versus USC, and I think that that's really indicative of what the Fighting Illini are this year. They're a team that's going to battle versus teams that they can battle against. They're not going to go out there and beat the Indianas. They're not going to go out there and beat the Ohio States, the Bamas, the Georgias, etc., which is why I don't think they would do very well in a playoff scenario. But if when they get teams that are of their caliber or lower, they thrive in that environment. Take a look at the Duke game. Duke, I think, is a pretty darn good team. Manny Diaz is a pretty darn good head coach, in my opinion. Great defensive schemer. They put up 45 on him. You look at the USC game, Purdue, they blew out Purdue, although Purdue's a very feisty team this year. And you look at the rest of their schedule, they have the worst of the Big Ten after Washington. They have Rutgers. You see there, 0-4 in conference play. They have Wisconsin 0-4 in conference play. Maryland 1-3 in conference play. Northwestern there at the end of the year. We're gonna know if they're frauds or not by then, so I'm not really gonna comment on that game because the jury is still out on them. No one knows where Northwestern is right now. I mean, they're 5-2, 3-1. But they've played a lot of teams that aren't great. So I do think that they're playing some tougher teams, particularly Nebraska this week, and we'll talk about that game as well. And I think that we'll really know where they're at after that game. So I do think that Illinois is going to cover. I think that they'll win by 10 in this game. I see this game being about a 24-10, 24-10, 24-14 victory for the Illini. All right, so that was good that we talked about that game. And all right, so let's go ahead and let's see. One thing I will say, I want to skip this game because Texas Tech is going to. Whoa, that spread is Texas Tech minus 37.5 points. Honestly, I think they'll cover that. Oklahoma State is really bad this year. I mean, they are not good at all. So we'll go ahead and skip that game. A couple games this week that are really honors. Like that one is going to be really ugly, a really lopsided score. Baylor and Cincinnati, I do want to talk about this game because Baylor had a lot of preseason expectations, in my opinion. They brought back their whole offensive line. They brought back their quarterback, their top 2 wide receivers, and a bunch of their defense. They were one of the top teams in returning production. But they have struggled this year. They lost to an Auburn team at home that was not very good. They lost to an Arizona State team that's been very up and down. And last week they lost at TCU. and that was a barn burner game there as well. They beat Kansas State by 1. They beat SMU by 3 in an absolute barn burner as well. So this team, their defense hasn't really showed up this year for them. And really, I think that Dave Aranda should be doing a better job with where he's at. He should have at least beat one of TCU and Auburn. If they're 5-2 right now, I give them the benefit of the doubt right there. But I do think that this game against Cincinnati is vitally important for them to stay relevant this year. If they can beat Cincinnati, I'll be really excited to see where they are, because I think UCF and Arizona will be wins. Um, I think that Houston's going to be a very hard game, and Utah's going to be a very hard game as well, but they have both those games at home. So they really need momentum to go into those games. And the only way you get momentum is through wins. And obviously, winning against Cincinnati here would be one of those wins. Cincinnati, as we go check out them, they lost their first game to Nebraska, very close game in Kansas City, and then has just rattled off 6 straight wins. They've been one of the surprises, in my opinion. I did not think that they would be this good. I predicted them for 5 or 6 wins. I can't remember. I think I predicted them to go 6-6, and for that prediction to ring true, they'd have to lose every single game on the schedule, which they're not going to do. Um, so I think that they are one of those teams that, could really contend for the Big 12 title. And that's in large part to their quarterback, um, Brendan Sorsby. Brendan Sorsby has an 18-1 touchdown to interception ratio. He's been flat out amazing this year. On the other side, Sawyer Robertson, very shaky. 7 interceptions, but 21 touchdowns. He's really one of the last true gunslingers out there. He just throws the ball out there, and just, they score a lot of points, but he throws a fair amount of interceptions as well. Um, you look at the rest of these teams, Evan Pryor has been really good rushing the ball. Um, and I think that when you go to Cincinnati, because we just went over Baylor, but let's go over Cincinnati. If they were to win this game, they look really good going forward. At the game at Utah, that's going to be a very tough game, but I think they'll beat Arizona and TCU. And obviously, that BYU game, you circle that game because BYU is ranked 11th right now. So, tough slate ahead for them. I could definitely see them dropping one more or two, depending on how this game goes. But a very interesting game nonetheless. The line is the Bearcats -3.5. Honestly, I'm ready to put points on Baylor. I honestly think that Baylor could come out and shock a lot of people here, but I would not be surprised if Cincinnati won. Texas, they have not been that great this year, but I do think they'll cover the spread versus Mississippi State. They're not very good. They had one fluke win versus Arizona State, and if they do beat Texas, I would say it's more on Texas, because Texas this year looks anemic on offense, and it looks to be that way for the remainder of the year. They don't have any answers on offense, and they got to stick with what they got. So I do think that they're not great this year. Wisconsin, Oregon. Oregon's going to win that game. They're going to cover the spread. Wisconsin is a dumpster fire. Miami, Stanford. Miami's going to cover. I don't think that Miami's going to cover the spread, actually, but I do think that Miami will end up winning this game pretty handily. And then we'll look at the rest of these games real quick. I do think that Tennessee will beat Kentucky. Really, again, I think Kentucky's one of the worst teams in the FBS. Boston College, same with them, one of the worst teams in the FBS. Louisville will crush them. Michigan State. Michigan State not that bad, but they're still pretty bad this year. 0-4 in Big Ten play. Michigan will be able to beat them pretty handily. So I do want to talk about, before we talk about Texas A&M and LSU, I want to talk about this game really quick, because this is at the end. This game will be playing when I live stream tomorrow. So look out for that. I will be live streaming tomorrow. But this game is very important because these are two teams trying to hang on for relevancy. Houston, as I wanted to pull up their schedule for you guys really quick, because a lot of you guys don't know what Houston's all about right now. Houston has been really good. Their only losses to the most talented team in the whole Big 12 conference, that would be Texas Tech at home. And I mean, that was a pretty bad loss. But they've rattled off a lot of wins, but not against a whole lot of good teams. Their only good team I think they've beaten is Colorado, and they whooped them. They lost no, they beat Oklahoma State and they beat Arizona, two teams that I don't think are very good. So they really have their first true test here, and if they can win this game, the rest of their schedule looks really good. West Virginia, UCF, TCU, and Baylor. So again, we're talking about some Big 12 contenders here. First with Baylor and Cincinnati, now with the Houston and And this game here between Houston and Arizona State. And we look at the other side for Arizona State, been very rocky. They've had some really bad losses. Really, they've had one really bad loss, and that would be at Mississippi State. Then you have Utah. The Utah loss was really bad as well. That was when a lot of people were riding high off of them after they beat a ranked TCU team. They beat a pretty good Baylor team. And obviously last week they bounced back and beat a top 10 Texas Tech team. Really, really clutch play there in that game. And they have Houston this week. Iowa State's going to be a very tough team depending on how they handle business earlier in the day. And then West Virginia, Colorado, and Arizona should be all wins for them. So again, it's about staying relevant in the Big 12. You can't really afford that third loss. There are too many teams, as we see here on this side here. Hopefully, you guys can see that. Yes, you guys can. BYU is top of the conference, 4-0. Cincinnati, also top of the conference, 4-0. Arizona State, Texas Tech, Houston, all are 3-1. And then you have teams like Iowa State, Baylor, Kansas State, Utah, who are all 2-2 in conference, but teams who I could see coming out winning. So the Big 12 is still very much up for grabs, in my opinion. Last game we'll talk about here, and then we switch over. Um, Yes, right here. Texas A&M, the number 3 ranked team. Yes, the number 3 ranked team, and goes and plays at Death Valley against LSU, the 20th ranked LSU Tigers. Very important game for both teams. For Texas A&M, it's important for validity. Let's look at what Texas A&M has done. They beat Notre Dame by 1 point, which is a really good win. Um, and they haven't really beat anyone since. Auburn, Mississippi State, Florida, and Arkansas are 4 out of the 5 worst teams in the conference, in my opinion. Well, Florida's better than South Carolina, but you guys get what I mean. They're 4 of the worst teams in their conference. They're not very good teams. And the Arkansas game was pretty close. Arkansas this year, very up and down. Whatever. I don't want to get on any side tangents, but they have 2 really tough games here at LSU and at Missouri. If they can get through those games, I think that they will finish out 3-0 versus South Carolina, Stanford, and Texas. But this game is really important for Texas A&M because it's validity. It's their first real win. Because the LSU Tigers are definitely really talented. And as you can see here, Josh Pate talking about if Brian Kelly's coaching for his job at LSU, and he is right now. He 100% is. And we talked about that in the last live stream, but I do think that Brian Kelly is going to end up getting fired because his schedule is very hard, and he's already 5-2, 2-2 in SEC play. As we already look at this, Clemson, that victory doesn't really mean anything anymore. Clemson is barely 500 right now. They're not a very good team. Everyone preseason power rated them really high. I did too. Everyone did. But that Clemson win doesn't look very good anymore. The Florida win doesn't look great at all. The South Carolina win doesn't look very good. So there are only 2 real games, playing at Ole Miss and playing at Vanderbilt. They got pummeled against Vanderbilt, in my opinion, because when you're watching that game, at no point did you say, "Oh, LSU really has a real shot at winning this game." I mean, unless you're counting before the game, but I mean, going into that third and fourth quarter, I never at one point did I say that LSU was going to win that game or really even get close to winning that game. I know it says it's a one-score game, but just watching it, it didn't look like it. The Ole Miss game as well just got away from them. So this game is very important because who do they have up next? They go to Bryant-Denny. They go play at Alabama. So it's really important that they go ahead and win this game. Number one, for validity, much like Texas A&M, they need validity. So does LSU. They need validity to say that, oh, they can actually compete in this league. They're not all hype. Last year it was all hype. The year before it was all hype. This year it seems to be all hype again. This year, and not title contention worthy stuff as well. So I do think that this game is really needed for them to get back on track. Because if they don't win this, then they're most likely out of the top 25, and you have Alabama on deck, ready and waiting. And they're going to be traveling to Bryant-Denny for that. So at that point, LSU could have already been broke. Brian Kelly could be fired after this game, after this Bama game. Arkansas, honestly, I wouldn't rule out them losing to Arkansas either. Western Kentucky, and then Oklahoma, a game that they will probably lose if they lose to Texas A&M. So the rest of the season hinges on this game. And that can be said for every game in the season, but it's especially true for LSU in this scenario that Brian Kelly is coaching for his job. By the way, Josh Pate does a very good job of covering the sport. I would go watch him as well as watching well, myself, him, and a couple others. College football Sam is great as well. Want to give him a shout out. He's a great guy. Um, so I do want. I got sorry there. I got sidetracked because I saw Pate's bald head. But again, this game is very close. I think that Texas A&M will come out with this victory. They're slight favorites. I wouldn't touch the spread. I think this will be a 2-3 point game, but um, I think that LSU are a bit pretenders in my opinion. So that's all of the top 25 stuff. I wanted to quick hit on some of the Big Ten stuff because I'm a Big Ten guy. I root for a Big Ten team. I'm not going to say that. If you've watched me before, you'll know who I'm a fan of. We're gonna, talk about that team here. Mm. But in any case, I'll skip over the games that we already talked about. But Northwestern facing Nebraska, this is huge for both teams. For Northwestern, it's validity. Excuse me. For Northwestern, it's validity. I mean, they haven't played hardly anyone as we look at their schedule. At Penn State, obviously, that win catapulted them into national relevance. They played Purdue and UCLA in conference and then lost to Oregon at home. So they're looking for validity. Nebraska would be a validity win for them. Nebraska this year has been very up and down, but for Northwestern, they've been pretty consistent. And if they can win this game, it would really, I think they'd be a top 25 team at that point. Going at a disgruntled USC team, and then at that point, you really the sky's the limit for them. Although they have a very tough schedule up ahead, a Minnesota team that is pretty darn good in their own right at Illinois. We talked about them and Michigan, a very tough team as always. So I think that Northwestern is playing for validity, and Nebraska's playing for their lives right now because Nebraska has. Excuse me, I don't know what's going on with my voice today, but Nebraska's playing for their lives right now. You know, you come off of barely beating Maryland, beating Michigan State, not a very good team, losing to Michigan, and their only good win being Cincinnati, which is now they're top 25. If they lose to Northwestern, man, it doesn't look very good from there. They got Iowa, USC, and Penn State, and UCLA, frankly, and they could lose to all four of them. They could also beat all four of them as well. Um, so I think that they're playing for their lives here. If they lose this, then I think they're going to lose a lot of the fan base. They're going to lose all the momentum that they had out of the Michigan State and Maryland wins. If they win this game and if they win it handily, I think that they sit in a really good position to play versus USC at night blackout game. So I do think that that game is vitally important for both teams. I think that Northwestern is going to cover the spread. Nebraska has not covered the spread in any of their Big Ten games thus far, the spread being Nebraska winning by a touchdown. So I do think that Northwestern will keep it close. I think Nebraska will end up winning by 4, something along the lines of 24-20. Talked about that game already. And then Rutgers and Purdue. Oh, this is going to be a bloodbath. Oh, both teams combined for 0-8 in Big Ten play, and their combined records are 5-9. It's not good for either of those teams. But Rutgers, honestly, I couldn't tell you who's going to win this game. I don't even want to predict who's going to win this game. I'm going to be completely honest. So I'm going to just go ahead and skip over that. You got Minnesota and Iowa playing for that pig trophy, which is really cool. Um, just another one of those big traditions. But as we go ahead and talk about this game here, Minnesota coming off of a really good win versus Nebraska. Let's not take that away from them. That was a outstanding win. The lines of scrimmage look really good for Minnesota. Their defensive line and their offensive line looked commanding in that game. And they're playing a team who their strengths are offense and defensive lines. So we're playing a team. So we have two teams with four offense and defense. Well, with two offensive lines and two defensive lines who are really good at playing against each other. So this game is going to be very low scoring, in my opinion. Iowa does not have a very, very good quarterback on their hands in Mark Gronowski. But Minnesota's quarterback, Drake Lindsay, isn't great either. So I think we're looking at a really low scoring game. Minnesota's Darius Taylor is really good. Um, Lou Brockington for Minnesota as well. He stood out to me in that Nebraska game as well. Iowa, all they got is on defense. So as with Minnesota, both of these teams' strengths lie in their offensive line and their defense. So I do think that this spread of 8.5 is pretty high. I would take Minnesota all the way. I think I will put a little bit of money on Minnesota to cover that spread. But in any case, I do think that that game is going to be really fun. I think Minnesota might even pull that game out. I could see Iowa winning very close though. So that's it on that front. I do think that these games are going to be really fun to watch, and I think that it's you know another week in college football. Save for every week. We only get 12 of these weeks, and it's awesome. So, with that being said, I do want to talk about coaching, and we're going to talk about this here as soon as I take a sip of water. All right, so I have a couple people who I think should get fired. Number one is Bill Belichick. Bill Belichick, as we can see, as we saw earlier, 2-4 overall right now, and not particularly close in any of those games. He needs to be fired. North Carolina needs to start over. It's way too much, shenanigans with his current wife being 24 years old. All the rumors around everything within that program. It just needs. They need to cut their ties and just let him walk after this season. Frankly, don't care if he stays on the rest of the season because their season is already over, pretty much. So I think that Bill Belichick should take the dignified path and walk away himself and retire. But if he doesn't do that, um, excuse me, I just blanked. But if he doesn't do that, North Carolina needs to get rid of him. Next up is Mark Stoops. And you talk about Mark Stoops. He's been around in this program for forever. Let me get rid of that really quick. He's been around for forever. He's been around since 2013. He took this team to a really good year in 2018, a really good year in 2021, winning the Citrus Bowl. And I think that his time is just over. Going back to last year and this year, at this point, you've been around a program forever. You can at least look like James Franklin, where they're winning every year, and then you see signs of the decline. The decline has been there for a long time for this Mark Stoops and Kentucky tenure. They went 500 for 2 straight years, 4-8 last year, and now they're 2-4, and they're set to be even worse. I think that they'll end up with maybe 3 wins, if even, this year. So I do think that Mark Stoops is going to be let go this season. I don't care what the buyout is. Teams have shown that they don't care about the buyout. They want wins, and Mark Stoops is not giving them wins. So Kentucky, they could be a very good program. I think that they have a very strong NIL presence and they have good facilities, but they just have not put a viable team out there in quite some time. The next guy is Shane Beamer because this year has not been very good for him. He's been with the team since 2021. He had a pretty good season 22, and right when they get some national hype, they immediately fall. So, as my history teacher put it, as soon as they have national hype, they crumble, and that's been South Carolina for a long time. And I do think that Shane Beamer will if Virginia Tech does not hire James Franklin, I think they would hire Shane Beamer in a heartbeat, in my opinion. Maybe because of his dad, maybe, but I do think that a little bit of nepotism still does exist. Look at the Belichick family. Look at other families out there. So I do think that Shane Beamer should be fired. Jonathan Smith, I like him as a head coach, and the odds of him getting fired are pretty low. Well, actually, let me rephrase. I think the odds of him getting fired are pretty good. Do I want him to be fired? No. I would like to see him stay at Michigan State for 5 years and just see what he does because he's a really good head coach, but he ran into a bad situation at the worst time, in my opinion. He was coming off of the Mel Tucker scandal, and they already had a bad team. It wasn't like, you know, they had this really good team and then Mel Tucker suddenly had to leave, so they had to go find someone really quick. No, it really wasn't that. Mel Tucker hadn't been good at all. He had one good season and that was it. They went 5-7, 4-8. Well, went 2-0, and then the team went 4-8. The team was not very talented at all, so he had to start from he being Jonathan Smith had to start from the ground up. And frankly, I was surprised that he even got to 5 wins last year, and this team looks even worse this year. Blame it on the quarterback, blame it on whatever. Michigan State fans want wins now, and that's just not what they're going to get for at least a couple years. So I do think that they will pull the plug at some point. Then you look at Dave Aranda with Baylor. I think that this is the least likely to happen, but if it does, it's going to come via this week. I put him on here because we talked about him earlier as if they lose this week, he's 4-4, and he has got a tough schedule ahead, and he doesn't even make a bowl game possibly. That could spell trouble for him. And I put him on this list basically because we're talking about a Baylor team that has not been very good. Let me rephrase. A Baylor team who has all the talent in the world, both last year and this year, and are not doing very much with it. And that's after, he inherited a really good team in 2021 and, went 12-2. He did a great job there. They were as high as number 5 in the AP poll, won the Sugar Bowl, and then went from that to being a 500 team to going 3-9 last year, rebounded. And if they can't really turn it up this year, I do think that he could be fired. Baylor is a proud team. Baylor is one of those teams that takes pride in their football team. They have great facilities. They have a great fan base, and they have a great recruiting bed down there in Texas. So I do think that Dave Aranda is one of those guys who, if he doesn't get the job done, really could be fired. So that's all I have on that front. I'm about ready to end this stream here unless anyone has any other questions. We got a couple chats in. Thank you for everyone who's been watching. I do think I'm going to end the stream here. So thank you all so much for watching. I will see you in the next one.